The Louisville football team lost a key contributor at a position that was already thin in depth to begin with. We'll talk about that and much more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Netsuite. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/lockedonncaa for a special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. I want to take this time also to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. It was announced on Wednesday afternoon that key contributor at cornerback Greedy Vance was entering the transfer portal. We'll talk about what that means for the cornerback room, not only for the bowl game, but also moving forward. And then we'll focus a little bit on that bowl game, identifying the key players to watch for both offenses. But before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. You can follow my personal Twitter in the bottom left hand of the screen below in the graphic. You can also follow the podcast Twitter page at LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into it. As I mentioned, it was announced on Wednesday that defensive back Greedy Vance was entering the transfer portal, and it's a big loss for the Louisville Cardinals, and there's no other way to slice it. When you look at it strictly from a numbers standpoint, it was a position that was already thin to begin with in terms of depth and stuff like that. When you look at it for the bowl game, it's not necessarily that big of a loss for the bowl game, considering that Air Force is the #1 rushing attack in the country. That triple option offense doesn't necessarily warrant a lot of passing, so to speak. Haaziq Daniels only has, I think it's like 980 passing yards on the season, completing less than 50%. So the Falcons are not necessarily that big of a threat through the air. But for the future, well, like I said, there is no other way to slice it. This is a pretty tough loss. In his freshman season, he was a COVID freshman. For those who weren't aware, this season 36 total tackles, had a fumble recovery, 7 deflected passes. Kind of struggled here and there throughout the season. I felt like opposing offenses in the ACC kind of picked on him, so to speak. But I felt like he got better as the season went on. He kind of got thrown in the fire, so to speak, with Kei'Trel Clark going down with injury against NC State. Had to step outside or opposite of Chandler Jones, I should say, and start at that other cornerback position. But he was one that I thought was going to be primed for some, excuse me again, some prime significant minutes next season, considering the numbers crunch, and there's not a lot of numbers in the cornerback room. When you look at what Louisville has on the roster or projected to be on the roster for next year, obviously, if Chandler Jones and Kei'Trel Clark both come back, you have your starting 2 right there. Outside of that, it's mainly younger guys: Rance Connor, Derek Edwards, Kenai Walker. All 3 were in that Flyville 2021 class. Outside of that, there are no other scholarship defensive backs outside of JUCO transfer Trey Franklin, who we're going to talk, more in the offseason about how I think he is, primed to be one of the starters next year. There's some rumblings of whether or not Kei'Trel Clark is going to be back with the team next season. I'm not here to entertain those or anything like that. I'll acknowledge them that even with the way college football is right now, and guys can go elsewhere and not have to sit out, find better opportunities for themselves, so to speak, or that they believe are better opportunities. But there's no other way to slice it that, the Louisville Cardinals already needed to go get more help in the transfer portal to try to address some immediate depth issues. Now it is almost required. It's pivotal. You have to do so because if Kei'Trel Clark or Chandler Jones doesn't come back, you're forced with not only starting some guys that haven't necessarily played a ton of snaps, but also, you're really banking on a lack of depth, so to speak. In the 2022 class, the only defensive back that was brought in is safety D'Angelo Hutchinson. And then they also have the safety MJ Griffin transfer from Temple. So they've addressed the safety position, but it's very evident that the quarterback position was one of the top positions that they needed to address anyways. Now it is extremely critical. It's required. I mean, you have to get some more depth. I would look to see Scott Satterfield, Brian Brown and company, pitching, a lot of playing time next year for, a Power 5 starter or a guy that can come in like Kei'Trel Clark at a smaller level school, but still a big time standout. So it'll be interesting to see what names pop up over the next couple weeks and next couple months after the bowl season. But right now it's kind of slim pickings in the the NCAA transfer portal in terms of defensive backs, especially in as it is concerned with the cornerback room. So overall, I mean, I think that they have the talent to find their starters. I mean, I think you have, Kenai Walker is a guy that I think could be starting next year with a good offseason. Trey Franklin has balled out ever since Kei'Trel Clark got hurt, and even before, he was really making some plays. Then obviously Chandler Jones and Kei'Trel Clark come back, which you hope they do. If they do, that kind of alleviates some of that that concern. But Brian Brown, the defense coordinator for Louisville, said in his press conference on Wednesday, it was kind of, coincidentally right after, Greedy entered the portal. He said, look, Greedy had some personal issues he needed to take care of, and he wanted to move closer to home. So whatever those issues may be, or even, anything like that, we wish him the best of luck. Thank him for his time here. Hopefully he goes on to have a very, very solid career wherever he ends up. But for the Louisville Cardinals, it just kind of, it's mainly dealing with the hits. And unfortunately, all programs across college football are dealing with attrition, more so now than ever. Scott Satterfield essentially called it free agency. And if you don't, comply with the times, you're going to get passed by. So, those comments, lead me to believe in what they've already done in the receiving or in the transfer portal right now. Going to get a difference maker running back, two solid wide receivers. I'm sorry, a solid wide receiver and two solid defenders in Mohamed Sanogo and MJ Griffin. So, it's one of those things that I'm not going to necessarily get worked about just yet, because they do have a lot of scholarships that they could throw out there. I would almost assume that they take probably two cornerbacks in the transfer portal. Like I mentioned, there are none coming in the 2022 recruiting class, which you had three come in 2021 recruiting class, but they still need to get numbers there. Right now, they're only at about 6 guys on scholarship, or somewhere around that number. So it's very critical. It's a tough loss, so to speak. I thought that Greedy played well for, when you take into context of, kind of being thrown into the fire. But Chandler Jones, Kei'Trel Clark both talked very highly of him at Football Media Day back in August. So, like I said, it's a tough loss. It's one of those that you just kind of have to deal with. I'm not going to be like some of the fan base that I've seen out there that said, oh, he kind of got burned a lot this year. And, there was some times where opposing quarterbacks picked on him. I acknowledge that, but also I think that there was a lot of potential there and a lot of good in store for the rest of his college career. So we wish him the best of luck. Hopefully there are some new names that pop up soon that we can talk about and hopefully replenish the cornerback room. So I want to switch tunes, kind of start talking about the bowl game again. I want to focus on the key players to watch for both the Louisville offense and the Air Force offense. We'll start with the Falcons first. We'll do that right after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, NetSuite. So I want you to imagine a scenario. So this is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software to see the full picture? you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It's the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth with visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, planning, budgeting, and more. NetSuite is everything you need to grow all in one place. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite. For the new year, NetSuite has a new financing program for those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/locked. Head to netsuite.com/locked for the special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Once again, that is netsuite.com/locked. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021 with local experts, betting advice, draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview began last Friday and will continue up until the national semifinals. So let's get back on into it. Talking about the two key players to watch for the Air Force Falcons offense. When you look at the team statistically, especially in the rushing category, they have 4 players that have rushed for over 400 yards. 2 of them are the players that we're going to focus on here. That is quarterback Haaziq Daniels and running back Brad Roberts. And I mentioned all year on this show, I don't necessarily like choosing quarterbacks as key players to watch because I think it's lazy. It's pretty much, an implied thing that, yeah, the quarterback is the key player to watch for any offense. But when you consider this triple option offense and Daniel's role in this offense, I feel like he almost has to be, 1A, 1B when you talk about key players to focus on. On the season, like I mentioned, only about I think he has 932 passing yards on the year, 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's completing 45.7% of his passes, so not necessarily lighting the world on fire in that regard. But on the ground, second on the team in rushing yards, 705. He's got 9 touchdowns to his name and has a long of 94 yards. So he has that big play capability. And one thing that I've been impressed with when I've watched some of the games, I've went back over the past week and kind of watched the games against Navy, against Boise State, watched some highlights against Army. And it's very clear that Daniels understands this offense to a T. He operates at a high level. His decision making is something that I think is one of those that you can't underestimate when running a triple option offense. It can't get lost in the sauce, so to speak. How solid a quarterback's decision making is in the triple option offense. He does a very good job of not only reading defenses, but also, identifying gaps and getting through, like I mentioned, 94-yard, season high for him on the year. So going to be a player that Louisville has to stay disciplined for. Like I mentioned, when he does throw the ball, it's often short-time routes. It's in third and long situations. So when we talk about keys to the game here in the next couple of days or next couple of episodes, I should say, with the weekend coming up, getting Air Force in third and long situations is something that is going to be critical for the Cardinals defense. But overall, Daniels has been very solid this season and one of the prime authors to this book, this illustrated book that is this Air Force offense. Very dynamic. #1 in the country rushing, over 340 yards per game, and they obviously spread it out. Daniels is a player that when you look at what he's doing, he's averaging 5 yards per carry, which is kind of a little bit down there on the team. But when you consider he's got the one of 2 players with over 100 carries on the season, it's not necessarily something that is going to catch you off guard. So Haaziq Daniels is the #1 key player to watch. #2, or I guess you could really call him 1B, is Brad Roberts, the junior running back, 5'11", 205 pounds out of Arvada, Colorado. On the season, I believe he is it's either 13th or 14th in the country in rushing yards, 1,279 on the year, averaging 4.6 yards per attempt, 13 touchdowns, which leads the Air Force Falcons rushing attack. And really, for being honest, you can kind of circle this whole rushing attack as players to watch. But very good at identifying holes. They pack a very deadly and lethal 1-2 punch with the cornerback and running back duo. The fact that they utilize the wide receivers in the blocking the way they do, the fullback is extremely critical as well. But Brad Roberts is one of those players, I'm interested to see how he does against this Louisville defense. considering the players that Louisville has played throughout the season that are high up on the rushing yards attempt, outside of Chris Rodriguez, who had a big day. Mateo Durant for Duke, not necessarily all that great of a day, had a lot of his yards at the end of that game against the Cardinals. And Sean Tucker didn't do necessarily all that great as well. And you look earlier in the year, Jerrion Ely, not that solid. I think he had like 30 yards for Mississippi in the season opener. What I'm getting at is all season long, Louisville has done a very solid job of containing a team's top running back. However, it's going to be a little different. You throw everything out the window with this matchup, considering the fact that you have to go up against an offense that is completely geared toward running the football, and it's completely geared toward deception. We talked about how discipline is at the forefront of what you need against a triple option offense, and Haaziq Daniels and Brad Roberts do a great job of not only doing their part in the deception aspect of it, but it's capitalizing on that deception. He only has a season long of 33 yards, but he's a very strong runner, a very good sized, able to bounce through the tackles. Doesn't have elite speed or athleticism, but he can read opposing defenses. He understands how to shoot the gaps, and he does a very good job. Just an overall solid running back that runs hard. A player that you will have to make sure that you wrap up and take down, because leg tackles are going to be tough to take him down. And if yards after the first initial hit is a true phenomenon, especially against a team that is very well disciplined and a very high effort team in the Air Force Falcons. So when you dive into it, it's hard to really pick anybody else. DeAndre Hughes is a player that maybe you could look at he's a wide receiver, but he's got 471 yards on the ground. Emmanuel Mitchell as well, 421 as a fullback. And then you have Micah Davis, wide receiver as well. But it's kind of a 1-2 punch, like I mentioned, for the Air Force Falcons that have a lot of complementary pieces that get plugged in when needed. So very solid offense, and it's going to be. I would assume, there's two names written on the Louisville defensive team meeting room's whiteboard, and that is Haaziq Daniels and Brad Roberts. Obviously more than just those two, but we talk about the heart and soul of this offense. It is evident to see where the production comes from. So we're going to transfer over into the Louisville side of things. And who are the two players to watch for that offense? We'll get to that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. It's had you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and toward the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all of the sports action. Head to the updated website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline is simply where the game starts. Two players I want to focus on for the Louisville offense, and it all kind of stems from the lack of depth in the receiving core right now. With the transfers, I should say, of Jordan Watkins and Justin Marshall. The two players to watch for are tight end Marshon Ford and wide receiver Ahmari Huggins-Bruce. I was thinking about going with Malik Cunningham in this one. Like I said, obviously, I don't want to go with the quarterback. Obviously, he is a player that we have to watch out for. The running back committee, you're going to want to see some production out of Jalen Mitchell, Travion Cooley, Jawar Jordan, Maurice Berkeley, Aiden Robbins, whoever gets their number called, so to speak. I also went kind of back and forth on the offensive line, but it's kind of hard to signal out to just one player on the line. So I went to the receiving core, and it just made too much sense. Obviously, there are two spots open of players who, this season were big contributors. Jordan Watkins was second on the team in receiving with 529 yards. That is one less yard than Marshon Ford. Justin Marshall was also in the top 5. He had 322 yards. They only combined for 5 touchdowns. However, Harrell has that by himself. Ahmari Huggins-Bruce has 4. But Marshon Ford is my number one player to watch for the Louisville offense simply because in times of uncertainty, even though you have guys, younger guys that have proven themselves throughout this year, like Harrell, like Ahmari Huggins-Bruce, etc., Marshon Ford is the safety blanket for Malik Cunningham. Ford, over the past couple seasons, since 2019, has been one of the more reliable pieces in Scott Satterfield's offense, both as a H-back in situations to where he's blocking for the rushing attack and also out in the open as a receiver. I look for him to be a guy that is relied upon a lot against a very solid defense. It's going to be about leading by example, and I think that who better to do that than the walking mismatch and matchup nightmare. Too big to be a receiver, too slow to be a tight end, as some would say. Obviously, probably not many people say that. I think he's, with the way receivers are now, you can be probably about 6'8" and be a receiver. But, very good hands. He's got the receiver-like abilities, that quickness for his size. But, he is definitely more than just a tight end. I don't like to put him in a box because I feel like he does a little bit of everything. Let's just go with, versatile playmaker Marshon Ford. Like I said, I think that in a game to where there is no Jordan Watkins, who this season, like I said, second on the team in receptions, second on the team in total yards, and then you have Justin Marshall as well, who was a big part of the offense, respectively, in context. It's going to be about relying on the players that you've relied upon all year long. And since Malik Cunningham, since 2019, Malik Cunningham has relied a lot on Marshon Ford. I think that we're going to see a little bit of uptick in targets and production in this game because Air Force has a top 20 defense with the 7th best passing attack in the country. I think it's the 7th best pass. I think it might be the 13th best passing. It's top 20 passing attack. So this defense is very stout. They don't give up a lot of big plays. They make you work for things. So it's going to be a tall task for this Louisville offense regardless. But I think that Marshon Ford is going to be a player that's relied upon a lot. Another player in a different, situation is Ahmari Huggins-Bruce. I think that this could be his, coming out game, of coming into being a star here at Louisville. I think that, I've continually compared him to Indianapolis Colts great T.Y. Hilton. Ever since he committed to Louisville, T.Y. Hilton has been my comparison because of that home run ability. Because when he touches the ball, good things usually happen. Scott Satterfield, late in the regular season, said, look, we are trying to find ways to just get him the football. Get him the ball in space, whether that is out on wide receiver screens, balls out in the flat, over the middle, deep balls. Regardless, Ahmari Huggins-Bruce is primed to be a star at the University of Louisville. I think that this could be the game that kickstarts that stardom. And, what better way to do that now with, more targets going around. You lose, your two of your top 5 receivers, and some guys have to step up. One of those guys is going to be Marshon Ford. We know that. We've seen that. He's stood the test of time over the past 3 years, over and over and over. When Marshon Ford's number gets called, he rises to the occasion. It's time to see that with Ahmari Huggins-Bruce. He's had some flashes of complete brilliance this season. I mean, we saw what happened against Eastern Kentucky. There's times where he's caught multiple touchdowns this season against other teams. This is going to be the game. I would not be surprised, if someone came to you, Dalton, what's your hot take on the game? Give us a random statistic that would be viewed as a hot take. I think Ahmari Huggins-Bruce is going to go for over the century mark in receiving yards this game. Will he catch a touchdown? Well, that's yet to be seen, but I think he's going to go over 100 receiving yards against the Air Force Falcons. I just think with the opportunity there, Scott Satterfield has already tried to get him the ball more. And now the floodgates open with guys at wide receiver needing to step up because there is it's a thin room right now. D. Wiggins isn't there right now. Devon Mortimer, Chance Morrow, Maurice Turner, etc. Chris Bell, the list goes on. So I look for Marshon Ford and Ahmari Huggins-Bruce to kind of lead the receiving attack, with Malik Cunningham. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a pretty good day for the Louisville offense. It's just going to be a matter of stopping that Air Force offense. So we talked about what Greedy Vance's transfer means for the Louisville cornerback room, not only for the bowl game, but moving forward into next season. We also identified the key players to watch for the Air Force Falcons and the Louisville Cardinals tomorrow's episode will be about the defensive side of the ball and all that good stuff. Before we get out here, a couple quick shout outs. First to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. You can follow that at cardinalsportszone.com. The great episodes there, great content. Also the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can check that out on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. This isn't Louisville related, and I know that unfortunately tragic things happen pretty seemingly every day, unfortunately. But some things that kind of draw you back. For those who don't know, my sister plays softball for Georgia Tech, and one of her teammates over the past couple seasons, Brianna Roper, who's now at Mississippi playing as a grad transfer. Her brother, Robbie Roper, who is a cornerback for Roswell down in Georgia, who had been getting some increased college attention. Unfortunately passed away on Wednesday. So want to extend my thoughts and prayers out to the Roper family, the Roswell family, everyone that knew Robbie, and everyone that was able to come into contact with him. So if you would, extend your thoughts out. Also, our thoughts are extended out to Don Wallman, Jeremy, and Joe Wallman's father as he battles with his health issues, and he's kicking it out of the park right now. Just at the end of the day, if I could tell you anything, it's just tell the people that you love that you still love them every single day, because you just never know. And I know that this is a sports podcast, but sometimes it's bigger than sports. And you never, I feel like we keep coming back to this this saying that you just never know, and that life is too precious. But it's in times like this where the harsh and stark reality of that smacks us in the face, and we pray and we think of those that are going through the pain of losing a loved one. There's no easy way to slice that regardless. So prayers out to the Roper family, prayers out to the Wallman family, and anybody else that's dealing with loss or any other tragic event. So that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Stay safe, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow for the special Christmas Eve episode.